Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. Today what we're going to do is we are going to move our home directory to a new hard drive. And this is a question that somebody asked me in a comment on Facebook a 3 days ago. And at the time I told him, I said, well, I think that might be a bit complex for a video. I went and found these directions on how to do it, and they were like really complicated. And I said, I don't know whether I could pull that off in a video or not. Then I got to thinking about it, and I went, wait a minute, there's an easier way to do this. So I have actually done this a couple of times now to make sure that it works okay. And I'm going to show you how to do it. This is infotainment, ladies and gentlemen. This is not a definitive guide. And I also want to point out that this worked for me. It may not work with every distribution. It may not work with all of the different kinds of hardware configurations there are out there, but you certainly can attempt it. You're doing it at your own risk, and I would suggest that you go ahead and back up all of your data before you attempt to do this, because if you brick the machine and you can't get it to work, then you may have to reinstall. So with all of that in mind, let's proceed and let us move our home partition, or rather our home folder or directory to a new place. You can also do this in reverse. If you created a machine where you created a small system folder or a small system directory, folder and directory are interchangeable. We've been through that. You have your system in one directory, and then you have your home directory in another partition. Then what you can do is you can do this in reverse and make it one big happy partition if you want to. I've done that as well, and it works, but I'm not going to be demonstrating that. You just kind of do what I'm doing in reverse. So we're going to do this with a virtual machine because it makes it so easy. In a virtual machine, you can add as many drives as you want to, and it don't cost no money. But we are going to assume that you have a computer and you've thrown an extra hard drive in there, and you want to make this your new home partition. Okay, so we go to settings, and then we will go to storage. And I'm going to go right here. I'm going to right click. I'm going to tell it that I want to add a hard disk. And we need to create a new disk, obviously. So let us roll through here. And dynamically allocated is fine. And the original system partition I put in this virtual machine was 16 gigabytes. So we're going to make our new home disk 32. Yep, that's cool. All right, and we need to give it a new name. We'll call this one Ubuntu Home. Okay, forward. We're going to create that disk. And now it has gone ahead and created it and hooked it up to the controller here. This would be just the same as if you went out and you bought yourself a new hard drive and you opened up your computer and you plugged it in. What we're going to do now is we are not going to boot the system back up from the installed OS. We actually need to boot this from a live environment. So if you have your Ubuntu or Linux Mint or whatever distribution you're using, you have that disk, then what you need to do is boot the machine off of that USB stick, disk, whatever. However you installed it, this is what we're going to do. All right, so let us add Linux Mint. We're going to use a Linux Mint install environment, a live environment, and it doesn't really matter. You can use any Linux distribution live disk that you want to, because the tools that we're going to use are universal. As long as it's a live environment, that will allow you to add some tools and things that we're going to need. You should be all right. So this looks like it's good to go. We've added that. We've got our new disk. So when we boot this up, it should boot up off of Linux Mint, the live environment. So let's boot her up. Now keep in mind, even though you may be booting from a USB stick, or you might be booting from, a file like we're doing here. It still takes time because the way that the live environments are set up, they use something called Squash FS, where everything is compressed. So the boot time is rather long, and what I'm going to do here is just pause the video, let this get booted up and settled in, and then we will continue when it's done. Okay, we got ourselves a desktop. Let's go ahead and full screen this, make it a little bit easier to work with. And I'm going to make some changes very quickly here to make it easier for us to see what we're doing. First thing I'm going to do is go to Settings, and then I am going to increase this font size, make it easier for both you and me to see. And then let's choose a darker background. That white, almost white background is really annoying to me, at least. I don't like light backgrounds at all. So we'll just pick one here that's dark. Got any good dark ones in there? No. Well, let's go here. Let's see if we got another good dark one. I don't want to take forever to do that. Oh, I like beach. I always use beach. That's a good one. Okay, so our little Linux Mint virtual machine is ready to go here. Actually, this is a live environment running in an Ubuntu virtual machine. We're just using Linux Mint to do our demonstration. First thing that we're going to have to do is install a tool that we're going to need to use, and that is grsync. grsync, not grstink. You can do with that what you will, and we'll need this to copy all of our files that are in the current home directory to the new drive. And yes, you can do this from the command line with the rsync command. I know that, but this just makes it a lot easier because creating a command to do this with rsync, there's a lot of options in that command, a lot of typing, and you got to make sure you get it all right. So easier to do it with the GUI in this case. So we'll go ahead, and yes, you can install small tools to a live environment. And we need grsync. Okay, so we're going to do that. And when you're working in a live environment, usually there is no password for elevated privileges. At least that's the way Linux Mint is set up. And I always have a live disk of Linux Mint around somewhere. I'm really used to working in it, but your distribution may not allow doing things with user privileges. You might want to look up exactly how you would pull that off. Some of them have a root password and others don't, so depends on how it works. In Linux Mint, you can do anything with the sudo command and it won't ask for a password. Alright, so grsync is installed, and we're going to leave our terminal up here, and we're going to look in the menu, and do not be amazed if you don't see it, because sometimes it does not automatically add it to the menu. This time around it actually did, so that's cool. If it doesn't add it to a menu or any tool like that that you install, you can always fire it off from a terminal. Okay, so we got grsync. That's good. We don't need this tool right now, so I'm going to go ahead and close it. We'll come back to it. The next tool that we need is gparted, and this tool is going to allow us to set up our new disk. So open up gparted. Now we want to make sure we're doing this on the right disk. This is why I say make sure everything's backed up. And in our case, the new disk is going to be SDB. And there it is right there. It is a completely blank, empty disk. There's nothing on it. So we go to Device. We need to create a partition table. It is offering to create an MS-DOS partition table. That is perfectly fine for what we're doing. So you can apply that. If you want to change that to GPT, which is the newer standard that's coming along, then you can go ahead and do that if you want to. Either one don't make no difference. Okay, so now that we have a new partition table, we've got to add the partition. We're going to use all of the space, and ext4 would be fine. Primary is very okay. Don't do anything strange here. Make sure that it's primary. You can use ext4. Now, in a virtual environment, I have found that if I roll back to the older ext2 file system, that things run a bit faster because ext4, it has journaling, which means that it's trying to keep up with a journal on there, and it's doing lots of writes. So in a virtual environment, that tends to slow things down a little bit. And these are virtual machines. If they die, they die. I don't care. So I use ext2, which does not have a journal. And we're going to go ahead and add this partition. Do not put a label on it. Suppose you could if you wanted to, but we're not going to do it this time around. Okay, so now to get that to take effect, we're going to fill up all of the space with an ext2 file system. You'd want to click this check. It's going to ask you if you really want to do this. Yes, apply. Just make sure you're on the right drive, because people get in trouble with this and they don't know what drive is what. Okay, so that's done, and we are going to verify that this did what we want it to do. So let us run lsblock. lsbk will show us all of the block devices in the system. So the first drive in this machine, the first hard drive, is SDA. There are two partitions on it. One of them is swap, and swap is currently hooked up to our live environment. That's normal. That won't bother us for what we're doing. And the second part here is the actual system partition for the Ubuntu machine. And then what we're really interested in is SDB, and we see that yes, we have a disk, we have a partition. So everything seemed to go the way we wanted to, and it's not mounted anywhere, which is what we want to see as well. Alright, so next step is to move all of the data that we have in our current Ubuntu home folder over to the new drive, and we're going to use grsync to do that. So we just fire that off from the terminal, and we will go ahead and first choose our where we're going to get the stuff from. So we look over here, and you see we have a 16 gigabyte volume. Where is it? What do I need to get here? I got a 34. It's not seeing the other drive over here just yet, but we can fix. No, there it is. Ubuntu. Duh, dummy. I was looking for it to say 16 gigabyte volume instead of Ubuntu. Okay, so we want to go to the home directory there. You see that all we have in there is one called Joe. And if you had more than one account in there, this is really important. So we're going to choose that. Okay. And make sure we have a trailing slash there. What that tells the system is that we want to copy everything in the folder. We don't want to copy the folder itself. This is important. Make sure that you have that trailing slash on there. And now we have to choose the destination. And the destination will be our new drive. Now you see this one's identified with this big long number. That is the UUID. And we're going to have to use that a little bit later on. So just want you to know what that is, and we'll choose that. Make sure that we have a slash here. So what we're telling the rsync command to do is to grab everything out of this folder called home, and then we want to put it into this drive. And we want to preserve everything. You do not have to click delete on destination, but I'm used to doing that, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. There's nothing there. We know there isn't. We just created the drive. Okay, so we've got that good to go. And then the next thing that we need to make sure is that we're going to do this as the super user. Because if we're copying other people's stuff, like you have 2 or 3 accounts on the machine, you want to make sure that you get like everybody else's stuff too, and it's copied with all of the original file permissions, and that it moves everything that it can and leaves it as an original. And the only person that can do that is the root user, so make sure that you check that. And that looks all good. That's the way we want it to be. So you can do a dry run just to make sure it's going to do what you want it to do, if you want to. And then it'll give you a bunch of output on the screen, and it'll tell you what it's doing. That looked good, so let's go ahead and do the whole thing. So what it's doing now is it's moving all of the stuff that is in that Ubuntu virtual machine's home directory over to our new drive. And if you have a lot of data in your system, which is one of the reasons that you might be wanting to move your home directory anyway, this is going to take a long time. I mean, if you have several, like 100 gigabytes worth of stuff, it's going to take an hour to hour and a half to do, depending on the speed of your drives and your system and all that kind of stuff. If you're doing this with all SSDs, it probably moved pretty quickly, even if you had a lot of data. Okay, so it says everything was completed successfully. We have no error messages. You can check the output here. That looks good. It's going to tell you everything it did. So we're going to assume that that worked, and that's perfectly fine. And everything has now been moved over. So the next thing that we have to do is we have to go into the original home folder on our Ubuntu installation, and we have to remove everything that's there. That has to be an empty drive, because what we're going to want to do is mount the new home partition into that folder so that when the system boots up, it just sees all the files and it doesn't care where it is. It could be on another drive. It could be across a network. It makes no difference to Linux, because this is how the file system works. All right, so here we go. What do we need to do? The first thing, let's go to our Ubuntu drive, which in this case would be in Media, and it would be under Mint, and then it would be, well, let's just go ahead and list the storage so we know what we're looking at. Oh, well, duh. Make that mistake a lot. Okay, now list the storage. Okay, we see we have two drives in here. One of them is called Ubuntu, and one of them is just that long UUID. You're probably not going to have a nice convenient setup like that where the drive is called Ubuntu, okay? Probably won't happen. I did that when I set up this particular virtual machine. I gave it a label. If you use the automatic installer and it created one big happy partition, then you're probably not going to see that. So what we want to do then is to go to Ubuntu. In other words, you're going to have two numbers, and you're probably just going to have to try them. I'll show you how to get into it real easy here in just a minute. So let's go to the Ubuntu. Now let's list the storage there. And now you see we have our Linux system. This is what the root folder always looks like in Linux. So we want to go to Etsy. See? We can move around in the system and do whatever we need to do. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Home. Oh, I went to Home on the Linux Mint machine. That's not what I wanted to do. So, no big deal though. We can just go back here and get these commands. Go back to that. Thank you. CD Ubuntu. Alright, we're back where we were. List the storage again. Pretty cool. Alright, let me clear this screen. Make it a little easier. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to CD into home. No / please. Alright, list the storage, and you see that we still have the home directories for me in there. If you had a bunch of people with accounts on your system, you'd see a bunch of these. We got to get rid of them. We got to make them go away. And this drive has to be completely empty. There cannot be anything in it at all. No hidden files, no nothing. So you might want to do LSA just to make sure there's no hidden files. And you see that we have the current directory, the directory above, and then we have my old home directory. The dot represents the current directory, and ... represents the directory above it, or the parent directory. So there's nothing in here but Joe, To get rid of that, what we're going to do is we're going to do sudo, and we're going to use the rm command, and we're going to do recursive, and we're going to force it to make sure that it can get rid of every file in there. And then you could, in this case, I could just type in Joe and it would get rid of everything. But if you have more than one, you could do star, which would be a wildcard to tell it to just clear out all of the directories in the directory. This is why the rm command is always looked at with a little bit of fear by even those who have been using Linux for a long time, because it's very powerful, and if you issue the wrong command in the wrong place with super user privileges, you could wipe out your entire system. So in this case, we're just going to clear out the home folder. So let's do it. And it just went ahead and did it. Now we can make sure that's empty by listing the storage. And there's an empty folder, so that's good. That's exactly what we want. Now, we want to just go up one directory, so I'm using cd ... This puts us back in the root folder of our Ubuntu installation. List the storage to double check, yes. And we want to go into etc. Okay. And we are going to sudo nano. And the file we want is FSTab. You may want to create a backup of this in case you screw something up. You can start over, but at this point, since we have already removed the home directory, the system won't boot properly anyway. So that's kind of an option, I guess. So this is the original file system table that was created when our system was originally installed, and you'll see that we have two partitions here which are identified by UUID, and the first one is our system partition, that's our original, and then we have swap. So what we need to do now is mount home, and we want that to be the next thing that mounts. So to get that, we need to find out that big number, that UUID, because we're going to have to put it in this file so it knows what to go after. Alright, so now that we have that, let's see, to do that we need to do sudo blkid, which is sudo block ID. Some distributions will allow you to issue this command and give you output without giving it super user privileges. Others won't, so I always just give it the sudo command first to make sure that I get all the information. Okay, and it's telling us that on this system that we have our drives here. So the one that we're really interested in is right here, which is going to be SDB1. That's the one that we have just created. And we want to get this number that's in quotes and copy it. Just like that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it gets copied. By clicking copy, it should do that automatically, but we'll just make double sure. So we're going to need that information to edit the FSTab file in our system so it will work properly when it boots. So we want to create, just make a space here, create a new line. And we'll do equals. Now this is that big number. These are unique universal identifiers. It helps the system to keep up with where things are. We will paste that in there. The next option that we want to give it is the mount point. And in this case, the mount point is home. So I just tabbed between those two things. You can tab or space if you want to, but I like to just tab to make sure that it's following all the right conventions. So we want to mount this in the home directory in the root file system. And then we're going to choose our file type, or the system type here. And in this case, we created ext2. So that's cool. Next thing will be the options, and it's perfectly alright just to choose defaults. If you want to do some more research on that and figure out what you want to do with that, you go right ahead. And then the next thing we have to do is dump and pass. So we're going to make dump 0. And then the pass, we're going to make 2. Now what the pass does is that when the system boots up and performs file system checks, it runs FSCK on the drives. This tells it what order to do it in. So we want the root partition to be checked first and then the home partition to be checked next. And so let's just go back and make sure that we have our conventions correct there. Looks good. Got tabs between everything. I realize the original file doesn't have that, but you see, looks good. Okay, so now this should work. So we need to save our work. Control O in Nano does that. Save as FSTab. Yes. Control X. And now we should be able to reboot the machine, and then it should start up with our new home partition working just fine, and then we can look around in that machine. So let's go ahead and reboot that now. Sudo reboot. And if we've done it all properly, then it should work. So Linux Mint is going to shut itself down. And it's going to tell me to press enter. It's going to eject the live environment disk. And now it will boot Ubuntu. I hear crunching. And I don't get any error messages on the screen. This is all a good sign, because if it couldn't find that home directory, it would tell us right up front, can't use home directory, and then it would use something else for the home directory or just not have one. Drive is crunching. That's just a normal little error message. This is probably taking a little bit longer than it ordinarily would, simply because of the fact that I am capturing video as well. Oh, I'm so excited. There we go. Our system now has a new place for its home directory, and we can confirm that by running the free command. No, not free. We want disk free. df h. And look what we got, ladies and germs. We have a new home directory, and in that we got 30 gigabytes of available space. And then our system directory, now look at that. We got 9.8 gigs of free space. So that is awesome. We can also run ls. Let's do ls block just to see how that is laid out. Dang terminal started under the launcher there. Okay, so yeah, you see that's what we got going on with our system. So we've got our swap, and then we've got the root partition on SDA and on SDB. It is now our new home partition, so that is working fine. And what else can we look at? Well, let's look at the block ID. Oh, there you go. That shows that our first partition on SDA is swapped. That's the UUID for that. And then SDA2, that's the root partition, and there we go. All right, gang, so that's how you do that. And you can do it in reverse, too. I did it on this machine that I'm recording this video on. Those of you who have been watching this, my videos know that when I reloaded this machine, if you paid attention or even care, that what I did was I originally created a very small system partition on it, and what I was able to do was move the partitions around a little bit using this exact method and make it one big happy partition, which is really what I wanted anyway. So very cool indeed. All right, so like I said, this video is mainly for infotainment. This is not a guide per se, just a quick little video to show you that it actually does work. You can do some more research. There may be some more I's that need to be dotted and T's that need to be crossed that I didn't bother with. I know that there's a complication here if you are using some file sharing things that you want to probably make sure that you check that out first, so that stuff doesn't get screwed up. But that's the basics of how to do this for sure. Thank you for watching the video. Look forward to your comments and suggestions. And also, make sure that you check out Easy Linux on the web. Check out Easy Linux on Facebook. And if you do, give it a like. I would appreciate it. And also, check out freedompenguin.com for lots of really groovy stories about Linux. This may end up being a Freedom Penguin story, actually. I might write this up and tell people how to do it there. We'll see how that goes. Thanks for watching, gang.